The league office is scrambling to keep this quiet, but the story is already spreading. Shaquille O'Neal confronted Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the tunnel on his way to the locker room after a recent game against the Lakers, and by all accounts, it came dangerously close to going sideways. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand exactly how things reached that point. Because if you think the Lakers dropping 108 to 131 against Oklahoma City was just another forgettable regular season loss, you're missing the bigger picture. According to insiders and people who were actually there, what unfolded in that tunnel roughly 15 minutes after the final buzzer is one of the most jaw-dropping things to happen in the league in recent memory. This wasn't two players exchanging words after a heated game. Security personnel had to physically step in. Shaq was visibly furious, and it all traces back to a pattern of behavior out of OKC that finally pushed him over the edge. We'll get into exactly what set him off in a moment, but first, here's how the confrontation itself went down. When the final whistle blew, the Thunder were riding high off a 30-point blowout win. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was making his way through the tunnel toward the locker room, probably already mentally moving on to the post-game press.
He had his struggles last year, but there's a turn on him. Now you got to send help. And passive by Reeves. Sorry, Reg.
This wasn't some quickly thrown together hate compilation. It was a detailed 14-play breakdown of Shai's foul-baiting tendencies, and across every single clip, the pattern is unmistakable. You see Shai doing everything within his power to manufacture contact and draw free throws, sometimes reacting as though he'd been seriously injured the moment a Lakers defender came within 3 feet of him. And the numbers behind it make the situation even harder to ignore. At the time this footage was circulating, Shai was averaging 13.3 free throw attempts per game, more than LeBron James and Austin Reeves combined for much of that series. To put that into perspective, in Game 3, the entire Lakers starting five collectively attempted just 18 free throws. Shai alone was being sent to the line at a rate that defied any reasonable explanation. Shaq has a specific name for what Shai is doing. He calls it anti-basketball, and the technique at the center of it is a move Shai has quietly perfected. A subtle arm hook on the drive where he grabs or redirects the defender's arm while attacking the basket, making it appear as though he's the one being grabbed. The defender gets the whistle, Shai gets the free throws, and because it happens in half a second during live play, the referees are consistently falling for it. At that point, the officials aren't enforcing the rules so much as curating the highlight reel. And that's where the story takes a much darker turn. Because according to rumors that have been circulating in league circles, there were allegedly powerful outside interests, including figures connected to sports betting, who have a vested stake in Oklahoma City's continued success, and who may be influencing outcomes in ways that go well beyond what happens on the court. That's a serious allegation, and it remains unverified. But the fact that it's being whispered at all says something about how much trust has eroded around how OKC's games are.
We give the benefit to those who, who necessarily are trying to manipulate the game into their advantage. I just don't think it's basketball. Like, let's just play basketball. All the foul baiting.
When a current active superstar publicly states that the league is compromised at the officiating level, it stops being Shaq's personal grievance and becomes something harder to wave away. But if you want to understand just how deep this goes, look at the numbers coming out of the 2026 playoffs, because the data doesn't just raise eyebrows, it raises serious questions. Shai's free throw rate hasn't gradually climbed, it has spiked by over 22% compared to his regular season numbers. That alone breaks from historical precedent. Playoff officiating has traditionally gone in the opposite direction. Referees let more contact go, allow the game to get physical, and reserve the whistle for obvious fouls. Yet somehow, Shai is getting to the line at a higher rate than ever. His free throw to drive ratio is now the highest recorded in NBA playoff history, surpassing even peak James Harden during the years when Harden's foul baiting became a national conversation. And it gets more specific than that. According to the data, in games officiated by lead referees John Goebel and James Capers, Shai's free throw rate runs nearly double the league average for that same period. At a certain point, a pattern that consistent stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like a directive. But as troubling as Shai's offensive numbers are, Shaq's frustration doesn't stop there. Because while Shai has mastered the art of drawing fouls on offense, the Thunder have another player operating on the defensive end in a way that Shaq finds even more troubling. This is someone who has quietly built a reputation as one of the most physically reckless defenders in the league, the kind of player who leaves opponents on the floor and walks away without a whistle. The way officiating crews have consistently looked the other way during his most dangerous moments is a large part of why the Lakers organization felt compelled to file a formal complaint directly with the league office. The entire officiating situation has reached a point where it's becoming genuinely difficult to watch with a straight face. It carries the feel of a predetermined outcome, as though the Lakers were never realistically expected to compete in this series regardless of how they performed on the court. May 8th was the moment that crystallized all of it. That was the night Austin Reaves finally reached his limit. And if you know anything about Reaves, you understand why that matters. This is one of the most composed, even-tempered competitors in the league, a player who kept his cool through an entire NBA Finals run the previous year and never once went looking for a confrontation.
Last year's NBA Finals. And the Lakers wanted to spend a little extra time with the officials.
He was spotted at center court in the middle of a heated exchange with crew chief John Goebel, and by all accounts, what was actually said between them was far more intense than anything the broadcast cameras captured. Reaves wasn't simply disputing a missed call. According to insiders, when he pointed out a foul that was visible to everyone in the building, Goebel didn't engage with the complaint professionally. He reportedly responded with a dismissive smirk and brushed Reaves off entirely. That single moment was enough for the Lakers front office to see exactly what they were dealing with. The very next morning, they filed a formal request for an emergency meeting with the league office. This wasn't a team asking for better officiating going forward. This was an organization demanding an explanation for why a crew chief felt comfortable enough to openly disrespect a professional athlete in the middle of a playoff game, as if the standard rules of conduct simply didn't apply. And then J.J. Redick walked into a press conference and decided the truth was worth $35,000. His post-game comments were measured, direct, and clearly calculated, and they cost him almost immediately. But before the fine even landed, he looked into the camera and asked what everyone watching already wanted answered. Why is LeBron James absorbing contact on nearly every drive into the paint, while OKC players are drawing whistles on the faintest defensive touch? Redick noted that LeBron's whistle-to-contact ratio in this series had dropped to a career low, a staggering stat for a player who was visibly coming away from drives with scratches and marks on his arms after absorbing contact from multiple defenders on the same possession. The NBA issued the $35,000 fine almost before the press conference was over. But for a lot of people watching, the speed of that punishment only confirmed that Redick had struck a nerve. You don't move that fast to silence someone who's wrong. You move that fast to silence someone who's right. Kendrick Perkins made the same point on the Pat McAfee show that same day, May 8th, and delivered what might have been the most sobering appeal of the entire postseason. He addressed Adam Silver directly, urging the commissioner to protect the integrity of the series before public trust in the product completely collapsed. He raised the issue of sports betting specifically, warning that when fans start genuinely questioning whether outcomes are being shaped off the court, the league has a problem that goes well beyond a bad officiating night. When Kendrick Perkins is the one urging institutional accountability, the situation has gone somewhere serious. But here's what made all of this boil over beyond just free throw counts and press conference fines. The officiating imbalance wasn't only handing OKC an advantage on offense, it was giving them cover on the other end of the floor, allowing a level of physical aggression to go unchecked in a way that went well past competitive basketball. That's the other side of Shaq's explosion in that tunnel. The free throws were part of it, yes, but he was also watching against Dort operate on the defensive end like the rule book didn't exist, and watching the officials respond as though they hadn't noticed. Once you see the footage the Lakers have documented on Dort's pattern of play throughout this series, the tunnel confrontation stops looking like an overreaction. It starts looking like the only logical response to everything that had been building. Because at that point, this stopped being about basketball. Against Dort has built a reputation in this league that some people call elite defense, but watching the film closely, that description is one of the most generous rewrites in sports history, because what you actually see when you study his game isn't a defender trying to disrupt plays and force turnovers. You see a player whose primary objective appears to be removing opposing stars from the game entirely, not through skill, but through physical harm. Shaq understands the difference between playing hard and playing dirty, and Dort has crossed that line so repeatedly, so consistently, that it's no longer a pattern, it's a method. Start with the March incident involving Nikola Jokic. What Dort did in that game should have resulted in a multi-game suspension, full stop. He committed a flagrant foul so severe that it brought the entire Nuggets bench to their feet. He made no attempt at the ball whatsoever. He simply drove his full body weight directly into Jokic's legs while the two-time MVP was mid-pivot. That was not a basketball play. That was a deliberate, targeted strike on the best player in the world, and it wasn't even his first attempt. Back in February, Dort fouled Jokic in a way that very nearly blew out the big man's knee, with referees positioned close enough to see every frame of it. They swallowed the whistle anyway. If a Lakers player had done that to Shai, the suspension would have come before the post-game press conference finished. But because it's OKC, it gets filed under physical defense and everyone moves on. Then comes April, and Devin Booker becomes the next name on the list. Same blueprint, different target. Dort tangles his legs into Booker on a routine screen, and Booker spends the rest of the night visibly compromised. This is not a coincidence. This is a calculated approach to eliminating the opposition's best players early enough that Oklahoma doesn't have to beat them at full strength. And that's exactly what Shaq finds most offensive about the whole picture, because you cannot operate a team where the superstar crumbles to the floor when a defender breathes on him, while the enforcer is out there treating playoff basketball like a contact sport with no rule book. Shaq calls it a fake tough narrative, and he's right. The double standard is glaring. Fragile on offense, violent on defense, and somehow the officials are managing to look the other way in both directions simultaneously. Head coach Mark Daigneault knows exactly what Dort provides beyond basketball. He knows the league has a vested interest in this young OKC story reaching its conclusion, and that interest comes with a certain amount of institutional tolerance. Late in 2025, during a game against the Spurs, fans were openly calling it out on social media in real time, watching Dort attempt to undercut Victor Wembanyama in a way that had nothing to do with defending a basketball play. The Lakers had it all documented. Every incident, every uncalled foul, every pattern. They brought it to the league office because they understood walking into this series that the fight wasn't going to be entirely fair. What makes it worse is the league's chosen defense for all of this, the idea that this is simply the new era of physicality. The only thing physical about this era is the effort officials are putting into keeping their whistles silent specifically for OKC. But here's why Shaq's voice carries particular weight in this conversation. He's not a retired legend looking for camera time. He's a man who knows exactly what it feels like to have the league look the other way while your body absorbs punishment that would end most careers. During the 2000 finals, Shaq was averaging 38 points and 16 rebounds per game, and his arms looked like he'd spent the night in a cage. There are high-definition photographs from that era showing actual gashes running down his jersey, blood and scratches that went completely uncalled. The unspoken officiating logic of that era was that if you were 7 feet 1 inch and 325 pounds, contact wasn't a foul, it was just the cost of being dominant. Teams built entire roster strategies around surviving him. The Spurs, the Portlands, franchises that kept 3 or 4 big men whose sole professional purpose was to go out and commit fouls on Shaq. Not the modern variety of foul, where a defender's fingertip grazes a shooter's elbow and a whistle follows. These were deliberate, full-body hacks, wrap-around grabs, hard shots to the arms and neck, the kind of contact designed to put a man on the floor. The league eventually had a name for it. Hack-a-Shaq. He absorbed over 1,000 of those fouls in one season, and not once did he snap his head back dramatically. Not once did he sell it for the cameras. He took the contact, kept his balance, and finished through it. That is exactly why he looked Shai in that tunnel and called him a cheat. To Shaquille O'Neal, a player who wins by performing instead of competing is the deepest possible insult to the game. especially when that player is talented enough to make the performance completely unnecessary. The league once had to invent a special defensive strategy just to slow Shaq down. He never needed to act, he just played. Shaq dominated because defenders physically could not stop him from scoring, not because he was engineering contact or hooking arms to manufacture free throws. He forced his way to the basket through pure, overwhelming ability. That's the distinction he's drawing, and it's one he clearly feels has been completely lost on the current generation. And then there's the attitude surrounding all of this. Watching OKC players run pre-game tunnel entrances and celebrate like they've already collected multiple championship rings, when by Shaq's reading of things, they're largely beneficiaries of a system tilted in their favor. That's the kind of thing that makes his frustration personal. It's that collision between old-school accountability and the current era's obsession with performance and pageantry that's pushing him towards his breaking point. He's particularly critical of DeAndre Ayton. In Shaq's view, Ayton possesses exactly the kind of size and physicality the Lakers need to disrupt what OKC is doing, and he's simply not bringing it. Shaq has essentially taken on the role of the older brother who has to walk back onto the playground because his younger siblings are being pushed around and aren't pushing back. Nobody on the current roster is staring down the officials. Nobody is getting in Shai's face, so Shaq decided he would. But the league's preferred framing, that this is just one disgruntled retired player with a grudge, is falling apart because the voices backing up everything Shaq said in that tunnel aren't retired legends or media personalities. They're current players and well-connected figures who are arriving at the exact same conclusion independently. And some of what they're saying is more pointed than anything Shaq put into words. Start with Dillon Brooks. This is a player widely considered one of the most physically aggressive, mentally combative defenders in the entire league, a guy who has never once been accused of playing it safe. And even he has gone on record saying that guarding Thunder players has become an exercise of impossibility because the only way to avoid a whistle is to defend with your hands raised above your head like you're surrendering. Brooks stated plainly that OKC isn't trying to compete anymore. They're hunting for contact and waiting for the call. That's not a soft player complaining about physicality. That's the league's designated enforcer telling you the game is broken. Then Kendrick Perkins went on First Take and compared OKC to hyenas, the most relentless, opportunistic, and irritating presence in the wild. Animals that don't overpower their prey so much as wear them down through constant harassment until they